Easy now. Papa got things making headlines.
Come down. Ooh, you make my high come down. Always tripping when you come around. I'ma have to cut you off, like right now. You see, I don't want to drive me. You can say that for your mama. Maybe you should smoke some. Me try the marijuana. I was never you good. The vibe was straight. Showed you a couple of things and they ain't finished change. I treated you right. Everything was.
Welcome to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast, powered by The Athletic. Shout out to the company. My name is Michael Sean Dugar. You can follow me on the tweet machine at MikeDugar. I'm verified on there. Shout out to Elon Musk as well, not taking my blue check away. Shout out to everybody who follows us on YouTube as well. Seahawks Man-to-Man is the name of the channel. That's the man, the number 2 man. We appreciate all the love and support, particularly around draft time when we're having a bunch of guests to talk about prospects that Chris and I are just learning about for the first time in the spring. Chris, go ahead, talk to him.
What is going on, everybody? It's your boy, Christopher Kidd. Be sure to follow me on Twitter at CKIDD206 and that's CKid206.
All right. And speaking of those draft prospects, we are continuing our little 2023 lead up to the draft where we call up an expert to talk about position groups that they've studied far more often than Chris and I have. This week, we're going to talk trenches with the homie from The Athletic, Nick Baumgardner, making his debut to the Seahawks Man-to-Man podcast. Nick, how are you, man?
Good, guys. What's going on?
We
It's
are
draft
doing
season,
okay.
right? Doing it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, Chris and I are not the hugest college football people in the world, and I'm a traveling beat writer.
I know that's a West Coast thing. I think that's a West Coast thing. It's college football is like an East Coast and in the Midwest. Yeah, I get it.
And when I learned that when I'm traveling, for games, and I went to Washington State, so I'm a Pac-12 guy, and I'll be in like Detroit or something on a Saturday, and like go somewhere like, hey, y'all showing Wazoo Stanford on Pac-12 Network, and they're like, hell no,
no man,
no, we're not showing that. So it's a struggle to keep up. I see that why there's like an East Coast or an Eastern time zone bias,
right? Yeah. It's unfortunate, too, because there's a lot of good football out there. I'm curious, though, right, with the Pac-12's like demise here, how this is going to change viewing habits or anything, because USC and UCLA, but I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah, it might be tough. I read somewhere where the conference might be, our partnership deal broadcast-wise might be with like Apple TV or Apple Plus.
Yeah,
or something like that.
Streaming.
Yeah, that you got to pay for. So
that's going to make it. People already weren't staying up late to watch like Wazoo, Oregon State at 10 o'clock Eastern on the East Coast.
Only those are true believers games. That's what I like to call them. Like only the true believers stay up that late for those games.
Yeah, Pac-12 After Dark is not gonna. They got to market that correctly to get people to pay extra for Wazoo Cal at 7:30 local time on Apple Plus. God bless them. Trying to market that, but we appreciate you talking about the nerdiest part of the draft. For us is getting the big boys in the trenches, but Seahawks fans, they know it's an important part.
Yeah.
So Chris, let's get into it.
Let's get into it as best we can. And in this scenario, when I turn on film to watch DBs and safeties, linebackers, something that I'm really interested in, there are certain things that I look for and what separates good and great from those players in those positions. What are some things you look at in the offensive line that separates a good one from a great one that you notice? Maybe footwork. What are the things that you look at?
One of the biggest things that I, have learned in the last couple of years, especially like because I get to work so close with Dane now, is the bend and the flexibility and what that really means. You've heard you guys around coaches all the time. You hear about that bend and sink your hips and what that means. It's that like really bendy athlete who can just like squat down and jump up and not have any problem and just be really explosive. It's not necessarily like how fast a guy is or how far he can run at a certain speed, but it's that like when you just watch a lineman, like can he squat his body down without sort of bending at the waist, bend his knees, and then like explode like that stuff, right? Footwork and pass pro is obviously huge, and sets and everything else. But just when you're really looking at it, like who has a chance, it's the guys who really just like are like springs, you know what I mean, as athletes, because they can recover. They can screw up, they can make a mistake, and they can still like, recover their body and get back into a play. And that's when you really look at it in the trenches, that more than anything to me is what I try to find in a guy. Like if a guy has that, he's going to get a chance over and over and over again. Is usually what we end up seeing.
So a good vertical might play a role in
Yeah,
there.
like
If a big
good
guy's
burst.
jumping.
Yep.
Okay.
Broad jump too, and then like I would say too, I look at like 10 splits, the 40s. Like if a guy has a good flying 10, like relatively, compared to the other guys, like if they can get off the ball fast, that sort of thing. But yeah, the jumping is certainly, but the other part, that bend, you really got to watch him on tape. Like that's the part where you really got to watch him on film to be able to see it.
Yeah, it's people like Nick doing the Lord's work around draft time, man. On tape, watching Big Ten interior linemen, man. That's we need more people in the world dedicated to that part of the cause. Before we get into the draft class, though, Nick, you're in Michigan, right? That's where you're based.
Yep.
And you covered I know Chris Burke was covering the lines for a little bit. Did you guys cover them together?
Yeah, we covered them together. Yeah, and I still do some stuff with Colton now and again too. So yeah.
Shout out to the homie Colton,
right.
covering the lines now for us. So you're familiar with the Seahawks' new center, Evan Brown, signed on a 1-year deal worth $2.25 million. Was a backup out there in Detroit, guard, kind of a swing interior lineman there. You've been watching him up close. Obviously, you're out there. How would you expect him to perform now that he's going to get a chance to be a full-time starter?
I thought that was a great signing by Seattle, and I really was surprised last year when Detroit was able to bring him back. I think Detroit was too. In that 2 years ago when Dan Campbell and that staff got there, they brought in a bunch of undrafted rookies all over the place, really, but a bunch in the lines. And Evan Brown was one that just never faded away. That was like Sewell's rookie year, and they were really focusing hard on offensive line development. And Brown just kept getting better and better. And then Frank Ragnow got hurt. I want to say it was like midway through that season and was done for the year. He missed like 8, maybe 10 games, something like this. And Evan came in and played, and I thought he was terrific. And I thought he was good enough to probably warrant to look somewhere as a starter last year. And I don't know if he didn't turn it down or took like the Lions brought him back because they liked him so much. But then he played again, as like the 6th swing guy this year because, guys get banged up and all that. So this year I was fully expected to see him, move on and find a job like this because this is perfect, I think, for him because they will have younger guys come in. They're going to draft guys as we're going to talk about here. But a guy like Evan, it's a prove it situation, really cheap. He's not that old, and he's played behind and with Frank Ragnow, who I think is one of the best centers, if not the best in the league. So I thought that was a great pickup for them. Seattle always does a good job with those interior dudes. But Evan, that was a really good, smart ad.
Specifically looking at Evan, how is he? Is he stronger in one area, run game, pass game, and good at both?
I think he's a steady guy. He doesn't make a lot of mistakes. I think he's just a steady, solid athlete who doesn't, he knows what he's doing. I think the one thing that the Lions do a really good job of with Hank Fraley is they're all smart. All the guys that play for him, Ragnow and Decker and Jonah Jackson, who's been one of the better young interior guys for a while. To be able to hang with those guys means that you know what you're doing. And I think Evan, when you watched him, he didn't ever get overwhelmed physically, up front. I think that's huge for guards and centers. It was hard to bully him. But at the same time, even if he was going up against a guy who maybe had a physical whatever, the feet were good. And more importantly, he knew what he was doing. There was just never a time where he looked like he was overwhelmed or making mistakes. And that's like 80% of it sometimes in there, if you can hang in. So that was what I noticed about him. He was just a really steady guy. He, never really faded away.
Looking at this entire center draft class, how would you assess it? Is this a great class, good class, not so good? How do you grade it?
It's not great. It's not deep. It's, there's some guys in here, I would say. It's not the best one that we've seen. I think a lot of people have called it pretty underwhelming. I don't know if I would go that far with it. I think that there's some guys, that are guards who can also play center. We were talking about a little earlier, like Cody Maw from North Dakota State. There's some guys that were solid college players that don't jump off the page athletically, guys that didn't test super well, and guys that frankly didn't look great in one-on-ones at the Senior Bowl. But I think if you put them with a good group, they're going to be good football players because there's a lot of smart players in this class, I think, overall, especially inside at center. Not a lot of terrific studs like we've seen in the past, but that's also kind of rare because centers it's a tough spot to play.
How do you go about staying with just the class broadly before we jump into some guys? How do you go about assessing the smarts that a center has, all the command he has to have of the O-line? How do you go about that on film?
Yeah, so I mean, for me, it's two-part. A lot of times for these guys, that's where I'll try to find, or if I'm around them, try to talk to them, but also talk to their coaches and try to find any interview that they have, try to listen to, and them discuss things or to see what their IQ is. But then also, I think you can watch them, you watch them on the field. I mean, if you watch a good center, make calls, make adjustments, and the line just throughout the course of a game isn't going the wrong way, isn't making mistakes, you're not getting beat because the protection is just flat wrong. I think that those are little things that you pick up. It's really easier, I think, for a center to be able to do that than it is for like a tackle or a guard. A tackle or a guard, sometimes, I mean, if a guy's completely lost, he's completely lost. But the center is really that pivot where everything just starts and stops with him. I mean, he's setting everything on every play. I did a film thing last year or a couple of years ago with Ragnow in Detroit and sat with him and just watched tape. And he was telling me how, I mean, he's looking at the safeties and the corners and how they're lined up for run plays. You know what I mean? Like deep stuff. So it's hard to always idea it, but typically it's the guys who communicate the most and the guys who you hear other people talk about him. Just like watch him more. And then like Kelsey, right? He was the perfect example over the years that he just crept up, got better and better. And, he's a Hall of Famer now.
So the Seahawks with signing Evan, I mean, either way, they probably weren't going to take a center in the first round. They're just not.
Mm-hmm.
It's just kind of not been their get down. They hardly give first round grades to. I think the most they've ever had is like 18 first round grades. Yeah, so I don't think they're going to use one of those on a center. So I think day 2 is probably what we're looking at. The first thing we want to start with is John Michael Schmitz. He's OC1. For a lot of guys, I think he's the highest graded or the highest rated player on the consensus big board at the Athletic. So he's OC1 for a lot of people. Looking at specifically as Seattle as a potential fit, if they take him, first off, where would you take him? And if you did take him, if you're Seattle, do you think he could compete with Evan for starting reps right away?
Yeah, I do think he's the first center off, and I do think that that's the big question. He's not going to be a first rounder. I would say somewhere probably on day 2. Maybe you get lucky and he's still sitting there on day 3. But that's where it's like with these groups that aren't super deep, you never know when the first guy goes off, and then the rush sort of happens like when somebody falls in love with a guy. But John Michael Schmitz, yeah, I mean he was probably the best interior guy consistently over the ball at the Senior Bowl, which is always important. I mean, he holds up well physically, moves his feet really well, was very consistent at Minnesota, played a ton of football there. And it's an interesting thing you bring up because I think Evan Brown is a guy who can play guard or center. I think John Michael Schmitz is a guy who can play guard or center. So I'd be curious to see in a spot like that, and I would be curious for Seattle if they would look at guys who really were only centers or guys who maybe can project and play a little bit more. But John Michael Schmitz, I think part of the reason why he's so high is because he's got some versatility and he's a really good athlete just overall.
Go ahead, Mike.
No, I was going to say that reminds me of something that to what you were mentioning, Nick. They've been in a danger zone with some of that a little bit, is getting guys who do everything, but necessarily don't do one thing super well. And not to say that's these guys in particular, but I remember we had Ray Roberts on the podcast.
He talked about that.
Seahawks left tackle also played for the Lions. And
that's right. I remember him.
A friend of the show. We need to get him back on as well. But he was mentioning one problem that the Seahawks have had in the past with drafting linemen, specifically with this regime, is they keep getting guys who are like a jack of all trades and a master of none.
Right.
Yeah, I love.
Hey man, like that's not wrong, right? Because like Schmitz was a big time center. He played just nothing but you project out and you say, well, maybe he can be more. But a guy like Cody Maul, I mentioned earlier, that's a projection at center. He's never done it. He just snapped at the Senior Bowl. So, I mean, I'm with him. I'm with Ray on that for center especially. Like, if you need one to start, the guy's got to have done it before and been, like, pretty good at it. Otherwise, you're really asking for it. Like, I would rather have a guy I wouldn't want to wait on a guy who's, like, experimented with it or played a little bit if I need him to start or, like, push right now. So I guess that depends on, how well Evan Brown plays and how well they evaluate these guys.
Another athlete to look at is Luke Wypler out of Ohio State.
Mm-hmm.
Tested well, great athlete. Is he someone that you can plug and play immediately, or he's a little raw, still needs to learn a few things, and he'll be a backup?
Yeah, I was a little surprised he came out. Not shocked, though, because the class, again, is not deep, and he is a great athlete. He's a really good athlete. And I think that Wypler is the one where John Michael Schmitz is more ready, and that would be, I'd be more comfortable with him. Whereas Wypler, I'm not sure if he's not more ready today, but the question would be, is he going to be a better player in 5 years? Is he going to be a guy that you can for sure re-up and get a second, contract out of? And he's really talented. Like, Ohio State always has really talented interior linemen in general. But Wypler, in the Big Ten against a lot of really good interior tackles, I thought moved around really well. But yeah, he's young and he can get pushed around a little bit. And that was the one thing with him that I wondered if he would go back to school and get stronger. But, really good athlete and, would be worth the risk if you took him on day 2.
How much are the measurables important for a center with a guy like Wypler, who's like 303, I think he was at the combine? Yeah. Seattle's had some kind of light centers in the past. Is there an ideal weight that you want a guy to be at the next level?
Well, you want him to be able to move, number one. Like, so you don't want him to be like so big that he can't, move. But yeah, I mean, a little stronger than that. I mean, for me, it's not 300 even is a little light, maybe. You want him to be a little stronger than that. But really what it is, it's more about, are you developed? Like, is your punch developed with like your arm strength to where you're delivering one and you're getting everything with it? Like, and that's where as an athlete, he's so young, he was just a 3rd-year player. That's where I think he's still going to grow. Like, there's a possibility that he just keeps getting stronger and keeps growing. And that would be the difference there, where I think he'll just naturally kind of get bigger in time. But yeah, like, you don't want those little guys because they get bullied and that's no good, especially when you're Seahawks and some of the dudes they play. So I wouldn't want that either at all.
Oh yeah, no. There's been some rough times here with centers since the traded Max Unger away like 2014 or something like that, 2015. Since then the rotation at center has been there's some decent guys, but then there's always been some games, particularly late in the year, where they're just getting put on their ass by someone like Fletcher Cox or something like that, and it's like, all right. Let's draft.
You got to have the strength, man. Right? Exactly. Yep.
Yeah. No, it can and that pressure up them. It was really prevalent, not prevalent, but most noticeable because Russell was so short. Right. So when you get interior pressure against a 5'10", 5'11" quarterback, it really stands out. It's like, oh shit, he has nowhere to go. He can't step up. He's already short. No, it was a mess. That won't be as much of an issue with Geno, but like nobody wants Vita Vea in their lap.
But you still need him. Yeah, you still need a guy that can protect for sure.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. Let's stay in the Big Ten here. I'm gonna try to get my man's name from Michigan right here, all by myself here. All right.
Okay.
Olu Oluwatimi.
Got it, man. That's perfect. That's about right. I think Olu Oluwatimi is what I always say, but I don't know if I'm 100% right either. Olu is what he goes by his nickname, so that's much easier. Yes.
Yeah. So let's see. Like I said, me and Chris, we don't really watch. We ain't studying Big Ten centers. That's It's just not our bag. But when I'm looking them up, when in doubt, I do tend to lean towards guys who are like award winners.
Yeah.
We got Remington winner, Outland winner. So I was like, oh. That's got to be good, right? So what's your overall impression of this guy?
He's really interesting. He's older. He transferred. He was a Remington finalist actually at Virginia the year before he went to Michigan, then goes to Michigan, steps into, I think, probably the best offensive line in the country and guided it to another Big Ten title. And he did not have a great Senior Bowl, it's not a great event for him. He's a guy who's more power and smarts than he is foot speed and sort of like agility and everything else. But he's one, you're asking about intelligent guys and how do you figure this out? He transferred in to Michigan in January, and by the end of spring by everything I had heard, had mastered their offense. And Michigan's run offense is really hard. And, to do that in 4 months, let alone 8 months, is crazy for a college kid. So he is really smart. That's the one. He might be one of the smartest, just pound for pound, intelligent guys who, when you get him up on the board, teams are going to really like him. There's 2 things. He's not super quick with the feet. He can pull and move a little bit, but the foot speed is still lacking. And there are teams or scouts that I've heard and stuff about. He doesn't always bully people as much as maybe you'd like, even though he's a bigger dude. But I mean, I like him a lot. He was really good at Michigan, and every time they needed something from him, he seemed to deliver. And I just thought jumping into a spot like that and then performing at that type of level, man, that's really tough to do, especially when you got talent around you that's sort of counting on you. And yeah, he was great the whole year.
I didn't realize until now that everyone we're asking about is from the Big Ten. That must just be the spot to go grab. You need a
right.
center. Go scout a guy.
All
They
these Big
playing,
Ten dudes, man. That's
they're
right.
playing big boy football up there
Yep.
in the Big Ten. With Olu, is there a type of scheme you think that fits maybe a gap scheme or something like that for a guy who's not super mobile?
Yeah, he's well, I think that he would be good in a gap scheme. I think he'd be better in that than he would be in probably a wider zone situation. Michigan did pull him some. They did move him out, and he was able to move around and loop some. It's limited, I think, how far out you can move him, but I think he can get out and climb a little bit and be a guy who, especially in a gap scheme where you're running power and counter and you're sort of sorting things out, and you need a guy to be smart. I think that he would be really, really good somewhere in that area. People have been down on him because of his workouts, but I think the league is probably not as down on him as maybe some of the draft scouts out there are.
Where would you feel comfortable taking him if you're Seattle?
Yeah, I mean, I think that I think I would take him late third, maybe fourth. I think he'd be there in the fourth. I think he would be there on day 3 because the other guys we've talked about would go higher. So, it depends on if you love him. Like, if that's the other thing, if you love him and you got to pick at the end of day 3 and you want to take a center, I wouldn't hate that. I mean, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world either. So he played a lot of football and started a lot, and he's a smart player, and you can do worse than that.
Yeah, Seahawks fans are just dying for the Seahawks to take a center after the Creed Humphrey scarred a lot of fans up here.
Oh God,
that was one of those where it was like
there's no Creed in this class. I gotta tell you,
it was the because you know how fans are on Twitter that they can fall in love with a guy, and it's just like, well, how much are fans actually watching
right?
How much they really know more than the guys who get paid to do this. But no, that was one of those where in real time, even after the Seahawks took D. Eskridge in 2021, it was just like, shit, guys, why didn't we take Creed Humphrey? And then you look at it a couple years later, even just a year later, it was like, man, Seahawks Twitter was just on it. So every time Creed wins an award and then D. Eskridge misses games, it's just like, fuck. So
brutal.
Just want him to take a guy. So is there anyone else that jumps out to you from that center group that we didn't mention?
Well, I think Cody Maw is the one that's super interesting. I actually gave them Cody Maw, the Seahawks, in my last mock that I did maybe a couple months ago. I did maybe about a month ago. I did a 3-rounder, and Cody, he snapped at the Senior Bowl. Never played and looked good. Looked really good, and he's probably the best athlete in terms of what we were talking about earlier. That bend was a tackle out there. Played some guard. I mean, he can play every position up front. Steve Avila is another one there, and I know we're going to talk about him in the guard spot that I think has snapped before. But those are two that, again, Maw is really good and really talented, and he's going to be a second-round pick somewhere in there. But he's another guy to where if you're not totally for sure about what you got around him, if you want him to step in and play center and lead your whole line, it might take a minute for that to sort of click. So I like those guys a ton, but, Joe Tippmann is another one there from Wisconsin, but that's like, are they full-time centers or it depends on what you need out of them right now.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
I was going to say Tippmann's another guy I had, and I was just like, shit, man, everyone I wrote down was from the Big Ten.
All the Big Ten guys. And then Cody Maw is basically Big Ten. North Dakota will claim that, more or less, right?
Wow, Big Ten, the land of the centers, apparently, this class.
You mentioned guards, and let's just get right into it. Some plug-and-play guys in the guard spot. But I do want to mention that the Seahawks, they found the treasure with left tackle and right tackle. Charles Cross 9th overall, and then Abe Lucas at 72nd overall. Yeah. Who are some prospects at the guard position that can come in right away and have a positive impact towards this offense moving forward, you think?
O'Cyrus Torrence is the best pure guard in the class. Skoronski is some teams think he's a guard. A lot of teams think he's a tackle. So he's, he would technically maybe be that. But Torrence is the best pure guard in the class. Never going to be anything but a guard. I don't think he's a center, tackle, anything else. They tried him at tackle at the Senior Bowl. Not really his thing. But he is – we talk about power. He's got all of it. Grown-ass man. I mean, he was ready to play probably in the NFL 2 years ago when he was at Louisiana, Lafayette, whatever it was down there, and then he transfers to Florida with Napier. Really good athlete who moves really well for his size and just never gets bullied. And really, I think kind of Florida probably shouldn't have won as many games as they did, and he was a big reason why they won as many as they did. Because, I mean, Richardson loved playing behind him, too, I'll tell you what, because he's one of the best run blockers in the class and just a really, really good, solid player. I think he's a first-round pick. I think he's probably the only first-round guard for sure. And yeah, that would be. But I think he'd be a good fit there. I think he would be immediate. You put him right in there, and boom, away. And you talk about those tackles, guys. Like Seahawks aren't that far away. You just need to settle center, get one good guard in there, and you can kind of make it work. So that would be an interesting one for sure.
You got another guy maybe off the top?
Avila. Steve
Okay.
Avila is probably the next on the list, honestly, and that's another one that's right on the fringe. And he played all 5 spots, I think, or at least he can. And he is tough, like super tough. Has played through some stuff. That whole TCU team is tough, but I mean, he was their most game-ready, NFL-ready lineman that they had. And, the Georgia game, I think, skews people's opinion of TCU, but Avila shouldn't be put into that one. He's a legit player. I think he could play.
Speaking of Esteban or Steve,
yeah, that's right.
In that scenario, let's look at his assessment from a pass protector. How do you view him as a pass protector? Because the Seahawks last season, they shocked a lot of people with their ability to allow Geno to throw the ball effectively, and the offensive line held their own for the most part. So with that being said, what have you seen from Steve as a pass protector?
I think he's great I think he would be good in that because this is a guy who's played multiple spots, and, to be able to hang at tackle, and I don't care what the competition necessarily is. If you can't hang there with your sets, with your technique, with your punch, with everything else, if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to get just worked, and it's going to look terrible. And he never did. I mean, he's a guy who's played multiple spots in college at a highly competitive level and played them well. So typically when I see guys that do that, even though we just got done talking about, I wouldn't love that at center. I love it at guard, though, and I love it at tackle. Matthew Bergeron, another kid from Syracuse, guard tackle, who I think is a great athlete, who his best football's in front of him, tough kid, and that's really what you're looking for in there. Can you move? Are you powerful? And are you smart? And I think all those guys that we just talked about there for sure.
Let me see. I was watching Steve what did you say his real name was? Esteban?
Esteban, yeah. That's his first, I think his full name. Mm-hmm.
I love it. I was watching.
I read that not that long ago. Yeah.
I actually love. It's like a little just random thing I enjoy. It's like guys who go by a name and then it's not even close. I think we broke it
because people were mispronouncing it, and he was like, "Whatever, just call me Steve." That's what it was. I swear, it was something like that. Yeah,
we've broken the news to Chris on this show twice on guys, maybe 3 times. I know we broke it because Chris didn't know Julio's name wasn't Julio. Broke that to him on the show.
That was insane.
Great. What was the other? Was it T.Y. Hilton? Was that what it was?
Oh,
yeah,
it might have been, but it was multiple players, and I'm sitting here like, I thought we were doing a pod on everything but people's names, Mike.
Yeah, I just enjoy that when someone just has a name that's just like, no, that's not even.
I love it.
Not even it at all. But I was watching the Natty. That's what it was. I was watching the national championship.
Yeah,
I wanted to watch Jalen Carter, and I was like, whoa, this dude in TCU left guard is fucking huge.
Yeah, he's a really good player.
Yeah, that's
he's day 2 for sure. I think he's a day 2 pick.
Yeah, and the Seahawks guard situation is interesting right now. They've got some decent guys. Phil Haynes played okay last year as a kind of a like a part-time starter with Gabe Jackson, who they then released. Damian Lewis has been pretty solid since he was drafted in the 3rd round in 2020. Both of them, though, are on 1-year deals. So who drafting for the future there could be the case at guard, particularly on day 2. I'm so glad you mentioned that O'Cyrus Torrence from Florida is a first-round guy. Yeah. I've mocked him there like 3 times, I feel like, already, whether in our beat writer mock drafts or in my own. I keep getting yelled at by Seahawks fans. Like, Mike, why are we taking a guard? We're taking a guard. We need defense. And I'm like, guys, I hear you, but ceiling.
Ceiling, man. Yeah. You put him next to one of those young tackles and it helps both of them. You know what I mean? Like, that's the thing that people got to remember about these linemen. These really good ones, they can help the guys around them. If it's a really good guard or a really good center, it's going to make the guys next to him look better too. And he's one for sure. I love that fit. It's a really, because he's a first round talent at guard. Not a lot of teams need that. So he's definitely going to be there, for you whenever and I think that would be a good fit for them because they definitely need it. And
I was this year was my first year at the Senior Bowl because the Seahawks usually don't have that many picks, and they definitely pick high usually. So and Alabama's hard as hell to get to from Seattle. So I usually don't go. And this year I go because they got 2 top. They have they have 2 top 20 picks, including pick 5, and I'm expecting get a feel for some people who they might take. And then pretty much no one who was like a first rounder showed up, including Tyree Wilson bailed out. But when I left, I was like, yo, the guard from Florida might be the only guy I really was like,
he's really good.
If you're going to use a first-round pick on someone who was here, it's that dude. And it was like, nah, Mike, we shouldn't take a guard.
And nobody got him at the Senior Bowl either. I watched all of it back. He got everybody. Nobody even He was like DeJuan Jones had one day where he beat everybody up. Torrence did it for the whole week. He was legit.
You guys hear that? Take O'Cyrus. Even if you got to trade back from 20, which is fine too. If you trade back to 24, 25, 26, or whatever the hell.
Be there. Yep.
Yeah, no, I'm here we go. I need Nick to confirm my priors. That's great. I feel good about that.
Yep.
I got one more guy for you in the guard class, and this will be Braeden Daniels out of Utah. Is he someone that you see fitting with the Seahawks, and what are some of his strengths and weaknesses?
Really good athlete, and another one of these guys that some people think, is he a tackle, is he a guard? What is he? And I think I kind of bucket him in the same thing as I would do Bergeron from Syracuse, where it's is he strong enough? And that's maybe the question of, can you hang inside in the NFL? You're going to be tough enough, but he athletically everything he needs. And for some of these guys, Daniels is a really good example. I think it's going to be a matter of like, if you draft him and you tell him, I want you to be a guard, I think he can take his body and shape it and do the things he needs to be a guard. You know what I mean? Like in college, he's doing what he needs to do in college to get by and do the things his coaches are telling him. You get to the NFL, and I think that that's still a possibility for guys like that are tweeners. So he's a really good athlete and a guy that, you love those guys who can also fit in a tackle, because the reality is you're not making it through 18 games now, whatever the hell it is, with all 5 starters. You're just not going to do it. It's not going to happen. So to have guys that can play multiple spots is super important, especially tackle guard. If you got a guy who can play tackle guard legitimately in the NFL, I mean, that's really, really good. Daniels, I think, would qualify in that area, same as Bergeron.
Would you see him as 4th, 5th round guy, perhaps?
Tough to say, because I think that a guy like that could be on day 3, because I think he's got that tackle, he could play tackle. And that's you can always sort of like, I think the conventional wisdom, even though I don't always agree with it, you can make it work at guard. Like you can put a guy in there and sort of like get by, but it's hard to get by at tackle. If you're down, like if Charles Cross or somebody goes down and they got nothing, and it's like, oh shit, like this whole thing goes to hell, man. You can't do anything. So I think a guy like that for sure. Daniels, I mean, I think Dane had him ahead of Jalen Duncan, the tackle from Maryland, and I don't necessarily disagree, because he can play probably 3 spots, maybe 4 in the NFL and be pretty decent at it.
I was looking at his I was looking at his testing numbers. You mentioned the athlete. When you said that, I was like, let me check his relative athletic score, which is like my computer knows. I've been on this relative athletic score site so much in the past like month. As soon as I type R in my browser,
it's so good, isn't it? That
shit pops up right away. He ran 4.99 at 294 pounds.
Yeah.
Holy
but you see, that's like a little thin, right? You'd like him to be a little bigger. So you say, if he's going to be a guard, if you want to move him inside, I think he's probably going to be a tackle. So I think he's going to go off the board a little higher.
Man, 4.99 is that's. I mean, I know you said the split is more important too. It's like, well, shoot, right. 1.7.
That's pretty good.
Pretty good. No, that's a fast dude, man. At 294. Although he had
that's really good.
Yeah, he's looks like he's kind of light. You think 294 is too light?
Probably for guard, but he could probably stand to gain 10 more pounds and be a tackle because he's so athletic. But the power, the play strength is the question for guys like that. You don't know until you see it. Until you see him in camp. And you guys know, you go out there and you watch those first couple of days of pads, and you're like, well, shit. Some of these rookies can go, and some of them are a long way away. And that's the one where you can't tell until you see it.
All right, this is off the wall question. We didn't talk about it in the off wax in the waiting room, but Mike has given up on the screen game. And I'm the person that there are times where they gain 2 yards, and I'll say that is a success, and Mike will shoot that down and say, no, Chris, that is terrible. Now, my question is, and I've been trying to formulate how I'm going to ask this, but this is my best attempt at it. How do you properly run a screen game where your offensive tackles get upfield and you have a positive gain? You see other teams do it all the time. Sometimes they result in 70 yards for touchdowns. For whatever reason, the Seahawks cannot consistently do it. So, Nick, how do you successfully run a screen? Can you give us the breakdown, the X's and O's, and how it works? That way, maybe the Seahawks can master it. That way, Mike can join my squad and be like, hey, you guys don't give up on the screens. Keep trying it.
There's 2 parts of that, of course. The back has to know what he's doing and be able to catch. And Kenneth Walker, I love Kenneth Walker. I watched him here at Michigan State. Not a great hands guy. That's the one thing with him that was a little bit of a, can he snag the ball? Can he catch it with his hands? Can he get that body turned and just pluck it and go and set up blocks in space? The bigger thing though is the offensive line, and it's the timing of knowing when to. You watch all the time. You're calling a screen a lot of times when the defense is just rushed.
Mm-hmm.
They've done everything at the quarterback, and you want to throw them off almost like a draw. It's that timing of, you're releasing, you're letting the rusher get upfield, you're releasing it, and you got to go. And you got to not only go, you got to find now we're looking at a landmark. We're looking at, I'm either looking at a spot on the field where I'm running to hit somebody, or I'm peeling off and trying to find somebody inside, and you're blocking in space. So if you're weak athletically as an offensive line, you're going to be a bad screen team. The Lions, who I see here all the time, are awesome at it because they have Penei Sewell. And part of that is they run inside screens with backs. They run outside screens with backs. They will run wide receiver screens with Sewell running out and just kind of like being like an extra tight end almost. So it's really about how athletic are all five guys, and then how well are they working together, because there's a lot of timing that sort of goes into that. But I wouldn't give up on it, Mike. I mean,
Mike.
Mac's got to catch, though. That's the one thing. If he can't catch or see what he's doing, it's not going to really matter.
Oh, the Seahawks are just such a bad screen.
Yeah, and you got to have timing. You got to know when to do it. You can't just do it all the time either. That's
the thing, Nick. They don't even do it all the time. Every time they do it, it fails.
And they don't do any, that's true. And they probably could, because the receiver screens, those little quick smoke screens, really don't work with Geno, because nobody's afraid he's going to run. Nobody's afraid he's going to run. Same with Goff. I see it all the time. It's like, why are you even doing that? Like, what's the point of that? But yeah, I get it.
All right. So the two things I learned there: athletic offensive line. Everybody's got to be on the same page. That's, I think, the biggest component, because I don't want to call anyone out, but there obviously might have been one player that just wasn't able to get out there quick enough, didn't execute the block properly.
Right.
Because there's nothing more exciting to me outside of receivers, running crazy routes and DBs not being able to keep up. There's nothing more exciting than seeing a 300-pound lineman peeling and seeing a, 200-pound linebacker or 190 corner eyes get big and you just see him maul the guy, and it's a nice 30-yard gain on the screen. The Seahawks don't have that often, so I have to go elsewhere to get that joy. Right. But hearing you break that down, okay, I see now what they can do, and maybe they can draft a guy or two that can help them get there. And then maybe this year, Mike, we'll see a screen for a touchdown, man, and you'll be back on the bandwagon.
Or at least the first down. We'll start with that.
You know what? We'll take baby steps. A first down, Nick. Thank you.
Yeah, it's not just that the Seahawks are bad at. They're bad at all of them, like to tight ends, to receivers. It's like not just the backs. Like then when they do have one, it always comes back. It's either an guy downfield,
and again, that's just not being athletic in space. So they've got to upgrade up front. You guys are right on that for sure. I totally agree.
Oh yeah, that's why we're dedicating the whole episode to the interior of the line. Because I mean, as much as Geno caught some flack for last year, his numbers kind of tailed off after the Bucs game in Germany, week 10 to week 18. His splits aren't great compared to weeks 1 through 9. But part of that was directly correlated, I think, to the play of the interior O-line. It just fell off. You guys getting knocked back. One of their first runs in the Thursday night game against the Niners that they lost in week 15, they're trying to run it up the gut. And as soon as Kenneth Walker gets the ball, he's hit in the face by Austin Blythe's ass. Yeah. You know what I mean? And that's
not good. Yeah. That's
not okay. There's nothing Geno can do about that. There's nothing can do about that. It's just you gotta.
And you guys nailed it earlier. I spent so much time watching Stafford here in Detroit, and he's very similar to Geno in that, he can move if you need him to move, but he's not fast. He's not the most athletic guy in the world. He can only do so much. So you have to have a guy over the ball that is going to be able to hold up, or you are screwed. Because if he's and then you could see at the end of the season for them, I agree with you completely. It wasn't all on Geno. I'm sure there was a couple of throws he'd like to have back, but I mean, he has no chance if they're not protecting up the middle, just how he is as a player. Right? It would be like that if you went all the way back to when he was at West Virginia. That's just how he is as a quarterback. You got to protect him up front, right over the ball. And if you can't, it's going to be really, really hard, which kind of makes it even more special that he was able to do what he was, all of last year, I think.
And it made the run game kind of tail off too, because Ken had some growing pains there. Ken was really boom or bust there in the second half of the season. He was either cutting it back and getting the first down with 12 yards or losing yards. Right. The O-line play didn't help there too. It was just I have to cut back because my left guard is in my lap as soon as I'm trying to run. I could see the need for some upgrades there. The floor is actually not too low. Right. I just think the ceiling could be upped with
the tackles are good. I mean, that's the most expensive part. And they got the good start there to get the tackles. Evan Brown's a good signing. So, yeah, they're poised here to improve big time in the lines, both sides of the ball, I would say, because they have so many picks.
Screen game about to go up, Mike. 2023, baby.
I've given up on the screen game in time, but I'm glad one of us on the show has hope, Chris, that we'll talk about it every week too when they figure it out. Nick, you mentioned him earlier. I didn't have him written down because he's just been a tackle in my mind, as everyone has him. Is remind me of the kid from Northwestern again.
Skoronski, Peter Skoronski. Yeah,
he's an interesting one from the Seahawks perspective because they could be in a situation where he's the best player on their board,
right?
But not necessarily a position of need because they have two tackles.
Right.
If they do find themselves in that position and they're like, fuck it, he's the best guy on our board. Maybe we can play him at guard if we take him after we trade back to 8 or 9 or something like that. Do you think that's a worthwhile use of his skill set in that situation?
I mean, he'd definitely be a guard. And I think that, I mean, there'd be nothing wrong with that. It's just a matter of what do you want to pay him? And a lot of teams have that philosophy of like, I'd rather pay the tackles. But a guy like Skoronski doesn't really fall into that bucket for me because he could start for you at left tackle, right tackle, or either guard spot for any team in the league, probably, coming in right away. That's how good. I think Dane has him as the top offensive lineman in the class, in terms of just everything that he brings to the table. So, yeah, I mean, he's a top 10 pick for sure. And I've wondered about how much trade value teams can dangle. Their Seattle at 5 is maybe going to have others with if Jalen Carter falls or something like that. Detroit, some of these other teams there that don't need to tackle, could you say, hey, if you want Skoronski, you better come up here and get him because he's not going to make it past like 10 or 11. And yeah, I mean, he'd be one to keep an eye on for Seattle, but it would be like, you'd be all in on the run game. I mean, that, you know what I mean? You'd be all in on that. There'd be no looking back. And there's nothing wrong with that, but that's sort of like the decision you have to make there.
If there's one coach left in the league that you don't have to try to sell to be all in on the run game, right. It is Peter Clay Carroll. that man will run the ball as many. He likes throwing it too, but boy, if you say, hey, Pete, you take this guy, you got to run the ball. Well, shit.
Book it.
Yeah, Pete's all in on that. I got one more guy I want to throw at you, since we kind of were talking a little bit about tackles, because the Seahawks are in that weird spot, like I mentioned. They could be on the clock in the first round where the highest guy they have on their board is a tackle. Mm-hmm. Whether it's Peter from Northwestern or remind me of the guy from not Paris, the other guy from Ohio State.
Dwan Jones.
Yeah. See, like he could be on their board, maybe they're on the clock at 20 or something like that.
They're later, yeah.
Yeah, it's like shit, he's the highest guy on our board. Yeah. He could raise the ceiling of the group if that's the case. Could you if Seattle's like, yo, Nick, hey, we're on the clock. We need you. We like Dwan Jones. So we got Abe Lucas. What would you do? Like, how would you respond if John?
I would tell him no Dwan Jones. Take Darnell Wright from Tennessee instead because he is another one of these guys. I think that you maybe be able to try him at guard. Dwan can't play guard, so that's the one where I would say he has to be a right tackle, and he's so unique because of that length. He was the longest player that's ever been at the Senior Bowl. Which is nuts. I mean, it's been some pretty crazy people that have gone through there. So it's not just the length, but he doesn't bend real well, and it would be a problem inside. So I'm not sure about him, and you'd have to move other guys. He can't move around, right? So I would suggest elsewhere. I would say don't take him. Take maybe Darnell Wright, but I would also consider him because I think Darnell's probably a fringe guy for a second round somewhere in there. So yeah, could be possible.
Yeah, that's the best player available versus position of need debate is really, I don't think it's as interesting in the later rounds, especially when you got to consider guys who can play special teams and you look at what the rest of your roster looks like and who's on what contracts. But in that first round there, like, ooh, man,
no, you're right.
I like our tackles, but damn, if this dude we think this guy might be an all-pro or some shit, or who's to say he doesn't raise the ceiling of our group? That's kind of how I looked at the first round these last couple of years as I get into more nerdiness. It's like, does this guy raise the ceiling of our group?
Yeah, I talk about that a lot. Are you making something from good to great? Do you have the ability to turn something from growing to a strength? You know what I mean? And I think that sometimes that gets underlooked. People talk about needs a lot. Sometimes I'm like, well, just make the best part of your team elite. That's a need, right? And then other people got to deal with it. And sometimes that's not the worst idea either. So, yeah, there's a bunch of ways you can do it for sure.
Yeah, cornerback is an interesting one for the Seahawks in the first round too, because Michael Jackson played okay at that spot, opposite Tariq Woolen. Tariq's locked in.
awesome.
It's like, is there a guy who raises the ceiling of the group at corner? Christian Gonzalez, Devin Witherspoon, Darius Rush, Keely Ringo, any of those guys in that first round. Yeah, so we'll probably have a whole pod on DBs too. That's me and Chris's favorite. But yeah, we had to hit you for the O-line guys because it's so many intricacies that go into all this shit, from centers to guards to moving guys from guard to tackle to height to arm length, weight. No, it's fascinating. We got anybody else we want to ask about? Chris,
man, that's all I got, man. And my screen question, I know I threw it in there randomly, so it just popped in my head. I was like, wait a second, we got a specialist on this, man.
I love it.
Nick, is there anyone else who's like, yo, guys, if you're Seahawks fans, should also put this guy on your radar?
Well, I mean, let me ask you guys, Jalen Carter, what if he's sitting there? What do you think they do? I've wondered about that the whole time, because for me, I know some of Seattle's picks over the years. I remember when they drafted Frank Clark.
Mm-hmm.
I've seen them take chances on guys. I'm curious to your guys' thoughts on if he's sitting there.
I talked about this today with some of my coworkers at the radio station, and I said, if I'm the general manager, we're taking the guy. Either I'm gonna get fired in 3 years, or I'm gonna get a bonus. I'm gonna get an additional 4 or 5 years because of the deal, and I'm okay with either or. It's someone's gonna take him, right? But this team right now, they're revamping the offensive line.
Mm-hmm.
They believe they can win this. Well, Pete Carroll has said they can win the Super Bowl with Geno Smith. Okay, build that O-line, and at number 5, get you a guy that, as Mike has put it, Mike Dugar and Mike Sando, I think, wrote in the story, is he going to be in the game that final 2 minutes? Jalen Carter will be in the game the final 2 minutes. From what we've seen, he's had a hell of a 3 months so far with everything going on. When he gets back to just football, I think he'll be that guy that everyone thought he could and would be. But right now, it's just crazy. Everything's going on. I don't know where his headspace is, obviously, but I would take it. I would just say, you know what? Either I'm going to be hired for the additional, get an extension, or y'all going to fire me. I'm okay with living with those terms there.
I go back and forth. It's so tough because, I mean, this is disclaimer. This is about to sound very cynical. But, like, how he performed his pro day is almost more concerning to me than the racing thing.
I know.
Because it's just – because, like, that's what I'm going to gauge you on. I mean, the racing thing is decision-making, which obviously is important, too, especially if we're going to give you a $20 million signing bonus, which I believe is what the 5th pick gets this year. But it's also like, all right, you had a thing happen. It was probably very stressful and a lot to – like, but you still had to come perform. Which is that's real life in the NFL. Like, you're gonna have some family drama, baby mama drama, beef with your agent, beef with your parents or whatever, and we still have a game on Sunday. Right. So and no one really cares whether you got into it with your mom the morning of the game. We're playing the Raiders. Like, get your shit together. Like, that's just the reality of the game. And his pro day was kind of indicative of that. So, all right, cool. You went through some shit. That happens. Can you still perform when the pressure's on? And he did not. That right there would be. I would probably grill him if I was a team. Not grill him, but just like my research would be more about that. Like, what went into you coming in out of shape, not being able to finish your pro day workout? That was again, it's very cynical. That was more concerning for me. That would make me worry because again, it's not just where he's getting picked. It's $20 million signing bonus we're about to get.
Exactly. Yeah.
At that spot. That's a lot of fucking money if you can't show up in shape.
Right.
So I probably would still take him. I think, and this is where teams I think make mistakes, and this could be Seattle's mistake, is you kind of overestimate not the coaching you have in your building, but like the leadership.
That's right. That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, you got it. The only way you can do it is only way you can do it is if you have a culture, if you have an established and you really believe in it like a lot. And if you don't, or if you're still sort of like, I don't know, even at that position, like I wouldn't do it. But if you're confident in your locker room, then absolutely I would do it because he's there, man. And
it's confident in the locker room, and specifically who's going to be those voices. Like,
next to him. Mm-hmm.
And like, is his position coach he's going to have with your team, whether Seattle or someone else? Did your position coach play D line? Like, is his D line coach a former D lineman?
Yeah, that knows what he's going through.
Did like in Seattle, his defensive coordinator is a former D lineman, D tackle, like big guy too. Like, does that help? What vets are going to be around him? Like when he gets that signing bonus, who is he going to be hanging out with? Like, are they going to be the guys that encourage y'all to go home at 10 o'clock? Or the type that's going to be like, hey, man, nah, we good till like 2, Like, there's so many variables when you talk about that. And part of me is like, shit, man, if there's that many, just move on. Yeah. Then I flip on some of the tape from from last season. And I'm like, you know what? swing for so
Okay.
offensive. So I think I come back to taking him. I think in our spoiler and our beat writer mock draft, whenever that comes out, the latest one at the Athletic, I think I took him.
Yeah.
So, but I'm weighing a lot more variables after the pro day more than I was after the misdemeanor charges for racing and reckless driving, which were serious. But it's like, dude, I need you in shape. You need to be able to go through shit and stay in shape and perform. And he did.
You should be able to handle it. Yep.
Yeah. Handle the pressure. He's going through a lot, but again, 20 is not a 5th round pick. $20 million hand you off rip. You know, so I think I would take him. That's a good question. That's like the big debate. A lot of people are off on him here because of the history with like guys like Frank or from a moral perspective, not a performance perspective. Like Frank, Malik McDowell was a mess. That's the one that's
I remember him too. Yep.
Yeah, Michigan State guy had the red flags, nothing legal.
Right there. Yep, staring at you.
Yeah, right there staring at them. They traded back thinking they were getting a top 10 talent at pick 35, which maybe they were.
He was, but mentally, it was not good.
But it's like, okay, why is he available at pick 35?
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah, so I get both, like Chris, I get both sides of it. I lean towards like, you know what? Fuck it. Ain't my money. If I was Jody Allen and I had to cut the check,
not my money. Yeah,
he's not getting my $20 million.
That's right. That's what I.
So go ahead, get paid, young man. So that's a good question. Nick, you've presented the question that's like going to dominate Seattle.
Totally.
So the draft.
How many days it is to the to the
Absolutely.
draft. So that's a good one. We got anything else, Chris? Get Nick out of here.
Man. We appreciate you, Nick.
Nick, man, we appreciate you making your debut here. Before we get you out, let people know and follow you on Twitter. Any work you've got coming on the Athletic, any pre-draft stuff, go ahead. The floor is yours. Plug whatever you want.
Yeah, Twitter is just at Nick Baumgardner, NickBaumgardner. And then, lots of draft stuff coming. Myself, Dane Brugler, Deontay Lee, Nate Tice. I wrote about Bijan Robinson, the Lions today, if you want to go check that out. And just Bijan in general. I think he's a first rounder. I think he's really good. So, but lots of good stuff coming for sure.
Wait, did you advocate for him, the Lions, to take him?
Oh, yeah. I think that I don't know where, but I love that fit. I think it's perfect for them. I think they're ready for that.
Where did the Lions have 6 and 18?
6 and 18. So I don't know if he's going to be there at 18. But I don't know if I would do it at 6. But I don't know. We'll see.
I like it. I like it. Spicy running back pick. So, we actually had Deontay on our last show. We had Nick on this one. We're going to try to get Nate next. Actually, just kind of complete
He's even better,
dream team there. Talk about tight ends and quarterbacks, and then we usually get Dane annually after the draft. So
awesome.
We appreciate all the stuff you guys do. Thank you guys for tuning into the Seahawks Man to Man podcast, YouTube, Spotify, Apple, The Athletic. Chris, anything else?
Nah, again, like Mike just stated, we appreciate all the love and support. We'll be back next week with another episode. Thanks again for tuning in.